Essendon's 2025 draft hand continues to look stronger and stronger, both for a couple of reasons. One, for the expected performance of Essendon ourselves. Another is the expected performance and continued decline so far of Melbourne, whose number one draft pick we have. And in addition to that is the prospect of some NGA, that's Next Generation Academy players, who look like they could be joining Essendon next year. So we'll have a bit of a look at that in this video. What I also want to talk about is what actually is the Next Generation Academy, because there's an assumption that everybody just seems to know what it is. And of course, not everybody necessarily knows what it is. They hear about it in the paper, they hear about it on the news, they hear that all the teams have these academies. But what actually are they, and why do certain clubs have access to certain players that other clubs don't have access to? So I thought I'd just briefly explain that, because there's an assumption that everybody knows what's going on, and I don't think everybody necessarily does know what's going on. So what it actually is, the AFL Next Generation Academy is a joint initiative between the AFL and all the AFL clubs aimed at increasing the opportunities for young people to learn and play the game of Australian rules football. It's targeted at mainly multicultural and Indigenous communities who may not have as much opportunity to be involved in football programs, or youngsters who, at least in the beginning, may have limited understanding of the game and how it is played. That's why a lot of the people that get picked in these Next Generation Academies you see are from, Sade Hawali for Essendon, a young Muslim player, Jamara Ugle-Hagan for the Bulldogs, players from, I guess, what you call non-traditional backgrounds. And the focus is on these non-traditional football communities, and it's available for young players of any skill level aged between 11 and 18 years old. Now, each of the AFL clubs have a designated region to run these Next Generation Academies. Essendon's zone is in the northwest metropolitan Melbourne, and it also includes remote zones of West Arnhem and the Tiwi Islands in the Northern Territory. So all the 18 clubs are designated these zones, which are, at least in theory, relatively equal in population to give clubs the same advantage as each other. But how well these academies are run and who you can attract, most importantly, into these academies will determine if you can make them a success, because they've been a raging success, generating lots and lots of very good players. But there was an important rule change last year, which looks like it has benefited Essendon and may benefit us again next year, which I'll get into a little bit later in the video. You see, before last year, it was determined that a player who was picked up after pick 40 in the draft, who was an academy player, the club whose region that player is from can then bid on that player, and they can actually get that play. We see that play out in the draft. Another club picks the player, and then the club who has the academy zone makes a bid and then gets that player. That was for just players who were picked 40 and over. But of course, if there was a player that was picked number 10, for example, then the club who runs the academy had no access to the player. It was only for pick 40 and beyond. So you could put all this work into a player, they get picked at number 5 in the draft, and whoever picks them just gets them. You can't do anything about it. It happened with Mac Andrew. Melbourne put a lot of work into him with their academy, and Gold Coast picked him up before pick 40, and there was absolutely nothing Melbourne could do about it. It was the case before that, in the early 2020s, that you could bid on the player if they were picked number 1. Jamara Ugle-Hagan was an example of that, but then they changed it that you could only bid if it was after pick 40. But now, as of last year anyway, they've changed it back again. And Essendon was a beneficiary of it, with Isaac Kako being a potential top 10 pick. He fell just outside the top 10, but roughly a top 10 pick. And if the old rules had existed, whoever picked him at whatever pick he landed on, if it wasn't Essendon, that club would get him. But the rules are now changed that it's not any time after pick 40, it's now just any pick at any number. So if an academy player is picked at pick 1 or pick 5 or pick 10 or whatever, the club who runs the academy can bid on that player if they want to and get them. So that's why we were able to get Isaac Kako, when in the years prior to that, we wouldn't have got him. He just would have gone to the club that picked him up at pick 10 or 11 or wherever he fell in the draft. And it looks like we may have another couple of promising young players that may be top 20 picks that we'll have access to, that if the old rules had existed, we wouldn't have been able to get, even if they were part of our academy. If you like this channel, please consider hitting the like button and the subscribe button. It helps the YouTube algorithm when you do so. It will ensure you never miss a video. It doesn't cost any money and it takes 1 second to do so. I would really appreciate it if you could do that right now. So before we get into those players, we're just going to have a look at the draft hand that we have. And it looks like it's going to be a pretty strong draft hand. Already, Hawthorn and Essendon look like they're the big winners from the 2024 trade period. The Hawks have managed to get Carlton's first round pick. So as it stands, Hawthorn, who are the favourites for the premiership, currently have picked 3 as it stands. As for Essendon, we parted with our first round pick 9 last year to avoid any concerns that the selection would be swallowed up on a bid by Isaac Kako. And the Demons accepted pick 9, which they used to take one of their first round picks, Xavier Lindsay. In return, Melbourne gave us an array of picks from the 2nd to the 4th round and its own future first rounder.
I've been looking forward to this.
So the Demons, who haven't won a game, they're 0-4 at the moment, are struggling. And it means Essendon holds pick 2 and pick 5 in the draft as the ladder currently stands. Of course, there's a long way to go, a long way for the season to play out. We don't know how we're going to go. Melbourne might improve, but as it currently stands, we've got pick 2 and pick 5. Just goes to show you've got to be very careful trading away future first round picks because you just don't quite know how you're going to go. Sometimes teams that look like they're going to be contending, like Carlton, sometimes fall away. So as it stands, pick 2 and pick 5, that gives us a pretty strong draft hand. In fact, I'll make a promise here to all my subscribers. If Melbourne do actually get the wooden spoon, I will give every subscriber $50.
Checks will not be honoured.
So a couple of the players who have been impressing with the Next Generation Academy for Essendon playing with the Calder Cannons are Hussein El Akar and Adam Swade. Now, a lot of recruiters believe that El Akar and Swade are both in maybe somewhere in that 20 to 40 range in terms of their draft, where they're likely to fall in the draft. It's a bit hard to say at the moment. It's all a bit up in the air. But that would be, pretty good for Essendon if you have 2 players that could potentially push inside the top 20. More likely between 20 and 40, but we'll see. So a little bit about these players. Swade is a 175-centimetre player. He's a midfield forward who likes to kick a goal. And Hussein El Akar is 171-centimetre small forward. So both of them have played 2 games this year for the Calder Cannons, and they were among the best players in both games. So in round 1 against the Oakley Chargers, Hussein kicked 4 goals from 15 disposals. Swade kicked 2 goals from 25 disposals, and he had 5 clearances, and both players were listed among the best players on the ground. And last week against Tasmania, or on the weekend against Tasmania, Hussein kicked 3 goals and Swade kicked a goal from 26 disposals. And once again, both these players were listed amongst the best players on the ground. So Essendon's draft strategy will be very interesting depending on if they wanted to pick both these players up, depending on where they're expected to fall in the draft, how well they're expected to go. As I said, they're probably expected somewhere to be in that 20 to 40 range at the moment. But if one of them starts to really sort of improve and blow it out of the park, who knows? They could be a top 15 pick, and that could force a bid on one of these players. I think Essendon are going to be definitely going to the draft again this year. We're not going to be exploring trade opportunities unless it was a no-brainer. I mean, we'll see what happens with the Harley Reid thing. That could be interesting as we get closer to the end of the season, depending what kind of trade capital we have and where Melbourne's pick ends up landing. But that aside, and we'll just assume that doesn't happen because that's a sort of a best case scenario, we'll probably be going to the draft again. So we'll probably look at I reckon we'll probably end up getting one of these 2 players, but it all depends on how they go. So certainly our draft hand is looking much stronger, and it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out in the end of the year. What do you guys think? What do you think Essendon's strategy should be? Do you think we should go to the trade period again? Do you think we should just go to the draft? I think we should go to the draft. I think we'll probably end up picking one of these players up. Maybe both. It'll be really fun to see how they develop over the course of the year and where they fall in the draft order, or where they're expected to fall in the draft order. If they're both exceed expectations, and who knows, get inside the top 20, they're probably just out of that at the moment. But look, if they start to exceed expectations, these academy prospects could be really good for the Bombers. And those rule changes, which allowed us to get Kako to our club last year, may see us get even more young talent into the club this year. So I'll leave it at that. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Have a great day as always, and go Bombers!